This is Dr. Robert Bates at Leominster Chiropractic Spine and Injury Center. Today we're going to discuss the importance of keeping your arteries healthy. We're going to discuss a little bit about the importance of the arteries and various things that cause damage to the arteries. And I think that you will realize that most of what you are told is not true, and that you can take very good care of your arteries and prevent high blood pressure and many other problems related to improper blood flow. The purpose of your arteries is to carry oxygen and nutrition to all of the cells in your entire body. And there are many articles that have been written that show that you are as healthy as your blood supply, which means that you can only be healthy if you're giving your cells, which make up the tissues, which make up the organ systems, which make up your entire body. You have about 14 trillion cells making up your body, and you have thousands, hundreds of thousands of miles of arteries and arterioles supplying these tissues. So if you can bring oxygen and nutrients to them and take waste products away, then you give the opportunity to all of your body to be very healthy.
This is a representation of all of the major arteries in your body as they leave the heart and branch off into the arteries that supply your head and your brain, as well as larger arteries that supply your arms. Then we have arteries coming off of the aorta supplying all of the major organ systems, with large arteries traveling down and supplying your legs. So you can see that your entire body is controlled and given nutrition by this transport system, which, if you understand this, you would want to keep it very, very healthy. This is an actual representation of the arteries from two lungs, where all of the arteries were filled with a latex compound and then all of the tissue was dissolved away. So what you are looking at is the arterial tree in the lungs themselves, and you can see how complex and how huge this is. This is a representation or drawing of a human heart. The large red vessel is the aorta, which comes from the left ventricle and ultimately supplies blood to the entire body. The smaller red arteries seen here are the right and left coronary vessels that are supplying the heart muscle itself. So, as with any muscle, if you do not supply nutrients and oxygen to it, it cannot survive. And this is what happens when we have diseased arteries or diseased coronary arteries, where you end up having a heart attack where the muscle of the heart dies, which is in the downflow distribution of the particular coronary vessel that is occluded, diseased, and no longer is open. This is a cutaway view of an artery itself, and you can see that you have three major parts of the artery or linings. The internal part that the blood is flowing against is called the tunica intima. This is what is diseased from usually inflammation, which your body's reaction is to cause plaquing and trying to heal it. There is no such thing as cholesterol that is bad, and cholesterol has a terrible reputation when we really need it. It is a simple sterol. It forms all of our hormones and is used in production of all of the cell walls and is a very necessary component to health. The reason that we have a bad rap for cholesterol is that it is found in plaques that are formed, but it is your body's mechanism trying to stop the damage from inflammation and sugar and other things that we will talk about in the future. We then have an internal elastic structure which gives strength and elasticity or stretch to the artery. There is then a middle layer called the tunica media, followed by another elastic layer of connective tissue, and then the outer part of the artery called the tunica externa. It is interesting to note that there are tiny blood vessels that actually supply the walls of these arteries, carrying larger supplies of blood. And of course, diseased arteries causes disease of the arteries supplying the arteries, which is rather confusing, but one of the reasons why they do not heal properly, and it is a vicious cycle. This is another representation of a cutaway artery, where the one on the left is a healthy artery showing the three layers of the artery, and the one on the right is filled with plaque. And it is important to note here that plaque is not like grease in a pipe that sticks to the wall. It is actually a reaction to the diseased inflammation of the internal layer of the artery that then is trying to heal. An atherosclerotic plaque is formed in stopping the damage to the artery. But of course, if we continue to eat what is causing the inflammation and smoke and do other things that cause damage to the internal part of the artery, our body, in its infinite wisdom, will continue to form plaque to try to heal the artery. So there is no such thing as genetically controlled health problems like this. Your body does not genetically cause plaquing. It has the ability to heal and is trying to do that, but you are not allowing it to do so.
So, what actually creates damage to these arteries and causes the plaque formation? The two biggest things in the literature have nothing to do with cholesterol levels. Very briefly, cholesterol has several different types, but we have an HDL, or a high-density lipoprotein, that carries fats away from your bloodstream, out of your bloodstream, and is supposedly healthy. We have two forms of LDL, or low-density lipoprotein. One of them is a large particle, which is not harmful. The smaller particle, LDL, supposedly is sticky and does cause a problem in plaque formation. We also have VLDL, which is a very small percentage, or a very low density lipoprotein. Getting back to what causes the actual damage, the two biggest things are sugar, which creates what are called accelerated glycosylated end products. And what that means is the sugar molecule combines with protein and nucleic acids and forms these small particles floating around that definitely do cause a problem, an irritation, inflammation, and plaquing in your arteries. A perfect example of this is a diabetic that tends to have higher sugars, and when they are checked to see how bad their diabetes is, they look at an A1C, which many of us have heard. That is simply an accelerated glycosylated end product that is attached to the red blood cell. And since the red blood cell lives about 3 months, it gives us a good idea of how much sugar has been in the bloodstream over about a 3-month period. So sugar is a very negative thing for many aspects, which we have covered in other videos on carbohydrate. The second most important thing, probably the most important thing, especially in the American diet, is that a pro-inflammatory diet causes irritation of arteries and ends up causing plaquing and hardening of the arteries. When you have the elastic portion of the aorta, where the heart pumps blood out immediately it comes into the aorta, it is like a large elastic balloon that expands with pressure and then reduces and keeps a nice even flow of your blood pressure. And when you have hardening or loss of elasticity, you get what's called a water hammer pulse, where your blood pressure, instead of going to 120 millimeters of mercury and dropping down to about 80 when your heart is not pumping, it will shoot up to 150, 160. I've seen it 220, excuse me, because the artery is so stiff it has no elasticity left. So what we need to do is we need to avoid sugar, and we need to have a more anti-inflammatory diet. We need to incorporate things like turmeric, ginger, boswellia, lots of fresh vegetables, organic vegetables and fruits that will help control inflammation. The other real important thing is genetically, humans used to get a lot of omega-3 oil, especially the 20 and 22 carbon, the EPA and the DHA. The EPA, the 20 carbon omega-3 oil, is very anti-inflammatory in your body. And the best literature shows that you should have about a 1-to-1 and no more than a 2-to-1 omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. The average American diet right now, and by the way, over 16-to-1, you're guaranteed to have chronic illness. The average American diet right now is 22-to-1. Terribly unhealthy. Where do we get this omega-6 oil? Well, a lot of it is from vegetable oils. For instance, corn oil, which is subsidized by the government, is cheap and is used in everything, well, in a lot of things, is about 86-to-1 omega-6 to omega-3. Very pro-inflammatory. It's like throwing gasoline on a fire. But canola, safflower, sunflower, all of these are very pro-inflammatory. So we need to get away from these. The reason that fried foods are so bad for you isn't because of the oil. It's because of the ratio of getting too much omega-6. So start to learn and read and change your belief system so that you can start to have a diet where you can totally avoid disease to your arteries. Let us talk very briefly about what is happening in medical care right now with cholesterol levels. In my opinion, and it is my opinion, that cholesterol should not be treated with statin drugs. I believe that sooner or later they will come off the market, even though we have new regulations now, and even more than 25% of the adult population over 45 is going to be placed on statin drugs. And it's more of a scare tactic where your doctor tells you that you need these or you're going to have a stroke or you're going to die of a heart attack, you have a family history, these things that are not really true. As a matter of fact, there's new literature that's coming out that I was privy to this past weekend that showed that it helps probably less than 1 in 20 people. But side effects for statin drugs right now are 48% increased type 2 diabetes, a reduction in CoQ10 levels, which you need for energy production for your muscles, cramping, sore muscles, less cardiac output because of lower CoQ10, increased calcification of coronary arteries, which is the major reason you're given a statin. It's actually being shown in about 50% of people to increase calcification and hardening of the coronary vessels. You also have liver toxicity, brain inflammation, many things coming out in the literature. So in my opinion, and in most people's opinions right now that read the literature, you probably should not take a statin drug, or at least you should try to evaluate many other different avenues before you do go on a statin drug. It's interesting to note that some of the research is showing that the only reason statin drugs show any benefit at all is that the statin drug, the molecule, acts as an anti-inflammatory component and doesn't really have much to do with lowering your cholesterol. I hope you have enjoyed this educational video about your arteries and the importance of keeping them healthy. And I hope that you can follow some of these guidelines. But remember, there's a tremendous amount of information that you can continue to learn, which will change your belief system, and that is the only thing that will change your behavior. If you are going to wait until you have high blood pressure or heart disease or kidney disease or anything related to poor blood supply, then take a drug from your doctor to try to reduce those symptoms. You are on a downward spiral to never-ending negative health. So get going on this immediately and make a difference in your life now and in the future. Yours in health, Dr. Robert Bates. Have a great day.